The knock came just after sunset. Daniel didn't need to check the security camera to know who it was. Some absences have a sound when they return. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, one hand resting against the wall, right where a crayon mark still lingered, faint and stubborn, from 5 years ago. Another knock, softer this time. Upstairs, a door creaked open. Dad Lily's voice, older now, sharper. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then he walked to the door and opened it. Rebecca stood there, thinner, paler, and for the first time since he had known her, uncertain. The Lawson house had always looked better from the outside. A 2-story craftsman home tucked into a quiet Seattle suburb with white trim symmetrical windows and a front yard that Daniel kept obsessively neat. From the street, it was the kind of place people slowed down to admire, not because it was extravagant, but because it felt stable, predictable, safe. Inside, Rebecca Lawson stood at the kitchen island, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. The dishwasher hummed softly behind her. Upstairs, footsteps small, uneven, followed by a muffled laugh. The kids were supposed to be asleep. She didn't turn. "You're going to let them stay up again?" Daniel's voice came from behind her, calm but edged with fatigue. Rebecca blinked, as if surfacing from somewhere far away. "I didn't hear them. That's kind of the problem lately." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. She turned, slowly, leaning back against the counter. Daniel stood near the dining table, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked exactly like he always did at the end of a long day, tired, composed, carrying more than he said. "I've just had a lot on my mind," she replied. Daniel studied her for a second. Not suspicious, not accusatory, just observing. "You always do," he said quietly. A pause stretched between them, filled with things neither of them named. Rebecca crossed her arms. "You think I'm not trying," I think Daniel said, choosing his words carefully, "that you're somewhere else most of the time." The statement landed harder than she expected, because it was true. She had been somewhere else, mentally, emotionally, long before she even realized it herself. "I'm here," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Daniel didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if acknowledging a fact that no longer required discussion. "Lily has a recital next week," he said instead. "She asked if you'd come this time." Rebecca hesitated. "Just for a second, I'll try." Daniel's gaze flickered something subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "That's what you said last time." Silence again. Upstairs, a door shut. Footsteps faded. Rebecca exhaled slowly, pressing her palms against the cold marble of the counter. "I can't be everything all the time, Daniel. I'm not asking you to be everything," he replied. "Just present." The word lingered in the air. Present. Rebecca turned away, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. "You don't understand what it feels like." "Then help me understand." She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "When would I have time for that?" Daniel didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was softer. "We used to make time." That hit something deeper. Rebecca set the glass down harder than she meant to. "We used to be different." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, we were." Another pause, but this one felt heavier. Final. Rebecca looked at him, really looked, this time, at the man she had built a life with, the father of her children, the person who knew her routines, her habits, the way she took her coffee. And yet, there was a distance now that she couldn't measure. Not in miles, not in words, just absence. "I don't feel anything anymore," she said suddenly. The honesty surprised even her. Daniel didn't flinch, didn't react the way she expected. He just absorbed it. "Is that about me?" he asked quietly, "or about you?" Rebecca opened her mouth and stopped, because for the first time she wasn't sure. Outside, a car passed by, headlights sweeping briefly across the kitchen before fading into darkness. Inside, the silence returned, but this time it felt like something had shifted. Not broken, not yet, but something had cracked just enough to let the illusion start breathing. It started on a Thursday. Rebecca almost didn't attend. The charity event was for a children's foundation, one of those polished glass and wine evenings where everyone smiled just a little too long and spoke just a little too carefully. Rebecca had agreed weeks ago, back when saying yes still felt automatic, back when she hadn't started noticing the silence in her own life. Now, standing in front of the mirror, she adjusted her dress for the third time. "You look great," Daniel said from the doorway. She met his reflection, searching for something Approval, maybe. Or recognition. "Do I?" she asked. Daniel stepped in, straightening the edge of her collar with gentle precision. "You always do." It was meant to be comforting. It felt rehearsed. Rebecca nodded, forcing a small smile. "You're not coming." "Late meeting," he replied. "I'll try to make it before it ends." That word again. Try. She grabbed her clutch already halfway out the door before he could say anything else. The venue overlooked the water floor-to-ceiling windows, soft amber lighting, the low hum of conversations, blending with piano music in the background. Rebecca slipped into the crowd effortlessly. She knew how to do this. Smile, nod, engage just enough to seem interested without actually investing. Rebecca Lawson. She turned. The man standing in front of her didn't belong to the background. Tall, relaxed posture, a kind of confidence that didn't need to announce itself. "I thought that was you," he said, smiling, like he had just confirmed something personal. "Ethan Cole." She shook his hand, noting the warmth, the steady grip. "Do we know each other?" "Not officially," he replied, "but I've heard your name. Daniel speaks highly of you." Rebecca raised an eyebrow, faintly amused. "That's surprising." "Why?" She hesitated, then shrugged lightly. "He's not the type to..." "Elaborate." Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying her, not in a way that felt invasive but intentional. Maybe he doesn't think he needs to. The comment should have landed as a compliment. Instead, it lingered somewhere uncertain. "And you?" she asked, shifting the focus. "What have you heard?" Ethan smiled again, but this time it was different. More deliberate. "That you used to paint." Rebecca blinked. "No one mentioned that anymore." "I haven't in years," she said quickly. "Why not?" The question was simple. Too simple. She let out a small laugh. "Life." Ethan didn't laugh with her. That's usually not the real answer. Something in his tone, calm, direct, made it difficult to dismiss. Rebecca looked away briefly toward the glass windows. The water outside reflected the city lights, fractured and shifting. "I guess I just stopped," she said, quieter now. Ethan stepped closer, not enough to invade her space, but enough to feel present. Or you convinced yourself you had to. She met his eyes again, and for a moment she felt seen. Not as a mother, not as a wife, not as someone filling a role, but as someone unfinished. The realization unsettled her. "You don't know me," she said, though without edge. "Not yet," Ethan replied. The confidence in that answer should have been irritating. Instead, it felt like an invitation. They spoke longer than Rebecca intended. About small things at first work, the city, mutual acquaintances. But the conversation shifted gradually, almost imperceptibly. Ethan didn't rush it. He asked questions that didn't feel like questions. "What do you miss?" "When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Do you ever feel like you're performing your own life?" Each one landed closer to something she had been avoiding. Rebecca found herself answering. Not fully, not honestly, but more than she had with anyone in years. At one point, she glanced at her phone. No messages from Daniel, no missed calls. She told herself that was normal. Still, she didn't check again. By the time the event began winding down, the room had thinned out. Conversations grew quieter, more intimate. Rebecca stood near the balcony, the night air brushing lightly against her skin. Ethan joined her, without asking. "You disappeared for a while," he said. "I needed air." He nodded, leaning against the railing. "Or space." She smiled faintly. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Answer questions I haven't asked." Ethan glanced at her. "You're not asking because you already know." Rebecca looked out at the water again. For the first time in a long time, her mind wasn't racing. It was awake. "You ever feel like you're living the wrong version of your life?" she asked suddenly. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." The certainty in his voice made her turn. "And what do you do about it?" He met her gaze, steady, unwavering. "You stop pretending it's the right one." The words settled deep, too deep. Rebecca felt something shift inside her, quiet but undeniable. A crack widening. Not painful, not yet, but enough to let something else in. When she got home, the house was dark. Daniel had left the kitchen light on, a habit. She placed her keys down gently, listening to the silence. Upstairs, the kids were asleep. The air felt still, untouched, familiar. She walked into the kitchen, resting her hands on the same marble counter from the night before. Everything was exactly where it should be. And yet, something felt off. Rebecca reached into her bag, pulling out her phone. There was a message. Not from Daniel. From an unknown number. Ethan. You left early. I was hoping we'd finish that conversation. She stared at the screen longer than necessary. Her thumb hovered. She knew what this was. Not an accident, not coincidence, a beginning. She could ignore it. She should ignore it. Upstairs, a faint sound, one of the kids turning in bed. Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment. Then she typed, Rebecca, maybe some conversations aren't meant to be finished. The reply came almost instantly. Ethan. Or maybe they're just getting started. Rebecca's breath caught slightly. She looked around the kitchen again. At the quiet. At the order. At the life she had built. And for the first time it didn't feel like enough. Not broken, not wrong, just incomplete. She set the phone down, slowly, but she didn't turn it off. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her sleep. And somewhere, between the silence of that house and the echo of a message still glowing on a screen, something invisible had already begun to unravel. The first lie Rebecca told wasn't to Daniel, it was to herself. This isn't an affair. It came to her one morning while standing in the bathroom brushing her teeth as sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin, quiet lines. Ethan hadn't touched her, not yet. They met for coffee, they talked, they understood each other. So it wasn't betrayal, it was clarity. She repeated that thought often, until it stopped sounding like justification and started feeling like truth. Mum. Rebecca blinked, turning from the mirror. Lily stood in the doorway, already dressed for school, backpack hanging loosely off one shoulder. You forgot to sign this, Lily said, holding out a permission slip. Rebecca took it, glancing over the paper, without really reading it. Field trip. Yeah, I told you last week. There was no accusation in Lily's voice. That made it worse. Right, Rebecca murmured, grabbing a pen. I've just been busy. Lily didn't respond immediately. She watched her mother sign quick, distracted strokes that barely resembled her usual handwriting. You've been busy a lot, she said finally. Rebecca forced a small smile, handing the paper back. That's what adults do. Lily nodded slowly, but she didn't smile back. By noon, Rebecca was sitting across from Ethan in a quiet cafe, tucked between glass office buildings downtown. This had become their place, not officially, not intentionally, but consistently. You look different today, Ethan said, studying her over the rim of his coffee. Different how? Lighter. Rebecca let out a soft laugh. That's a dangerous observation. Why? Because it means you're paying attention. Ethan didn't look away. I always am. The words settled into her like warmth. Not overwhelming. Just enough. You ever notice, Rebecca said, tracing the edge of her cup, how easy it is to disappear in your own life? Ethan leaned forward slightly. Only if it was never really yours to begin with. That again. That quiet, deliberate way he reframed everything. She thought she understood. Rebecca felt it again, that subtle shift. The one that made her question not just her choices, but her entire narrative. I used to paint, she said suddenly. Ethan smiled faintly. You told me. No, I mean, really paint, hours at a time. I'd lose track of everything. What stopped you? Rebecca hesitated. Then she answered honestly. I did. Ethan didn't interrupt. I told myself there were more important things. Kids, stability, being responsible. She exhaled softly. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person. I became a role. Ethan's voice was quieter now. And now Rebecca looked at him. And, for the first time, she didn't see risk, she saw permission. Now I feel like I'm waking up. That afternoon, she didn't go home right away. Instead, she drove past her neighborhood, past the familiar rows of houses, the parked cars, the quiet sidewalks where children rode bikes in slow circles. She kept driving to a part of the city she hadn't visited in years, an art supply store tucked between a bookstore and a closed-down cafe. The bell above the door chimed softly as she stepped inside. The smell hit her instantly. Paint, paper, turpentine, memory. Rebecca stood there for a long moment, her chest tightening, not with sadness but something sharper. Recognition. She moved slowly through the aisles, fingers brushing over brushes, canvases, tubes of color she hadn't touched in nearly a decade. This was who she used to be. Before routines, before expectations, before she learned how to disappear quietly. You looking for anything specific? The clerk's voice startled her slightly. Rebecca shook her head. No, just remembering. She left the store 20 minutes later with more than she planned to buy, more than she could explain. When she finally got home, the house felt different. Not because it had changed, but because she had. Daniel was in the living room helping their youngest with homework. He glanced up as she entered. Hey, he said. You're late. Traffic? Rebecca replied automatically. It came too easily, too smoothly. Daniel nodded, accepting it without question. That made something twist inside her. Not guilt, something else. Distance. Mum. Look, their youngest said, holding up a worksheet. I got all of them right. Rebecca smiled, stepping closer. That's amazing. She meant it, but her voice felt disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. Daniel watched her for a second longer than usual. You okay? He asked. Rebecca met his gaze, and for a brief moment she saw it. The life she had, the man who had been steady even when she wasn't, the children who still reached for her without hesitation. It should have grounded her. It should have pulled her back. Instead, it felt like something she was slowly outgrowing. I'm fine, she said, and this time it wasn't just a lie, it was a decision. That night, after everyone was asleep, Rebecca sat alone in the spare room. The canvas in front of her was blank. Her hands hovered over it, uncertain at first. Then she began. The first stroke was hesitant, the second more certain. By the third, she wasn't thinking anymore. Hours passed without her noticing. Colors bled into each other. Shapes formed, dissolved, reformed. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't controlled, but it was alive. Just like the feeling she couldn't quite name. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. She ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again, and again. Finally, she picked it up. Ethan. What are you doing right now? Rebecca looked at the painting, at the version of herself that had been buried for years. Then she typed, Rebecca, something I should have never stopped doing. There was a pause. Then Ethan, I'd like to see that version of you. Rebecca stared at the message. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, from certainty, because in her mind, this wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was about her. Who she used to be. Who she could be again. And somehow, he had become the bridge between those two versions. Days turned into weeks. The messages became calls, the calls became meetings, and somewhere in between lines, blurred, Rebecca stopped noticing when she crossed them. She started staying out later, missing small things, forgetting details that used to matter. Lily stopped asking where she was. Daniel stopped asking if she'd be home for dinner. Silence replaced questions. Distance replaced tension. It was easier that way. One evening, as Rebecca sat across from Ethan, in his apartment, wine untouched between them, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. You don't have to pretend with me, he said softly. I'm not pretending. Then what are you doing? Rebecca looked at him, and for the first time she said it out loud. I'm choosing. Ethan held her gaze. Choosing what? She didn't hesitate. Myself. The word hung in the air, powerful, convincing, beautiful. In the way illusions often are at their peak. That night, when she returned home, Daniel was awake, sitting in the dark, waiting. You've been gone a lot, he said quietly. Rebecca set her bag down, her movements calm, measured. I told you I've been busy. Daniel nodded slowly. Then he asked the question she had been avoiding. Is there someone else? The room stilled. Time stretched. Rebecca looked at him, at the man who had built a life with her, and for a split second something flickered. Doubt. Then it was gone. No, she said. And this time, the lie didn't even echo. Because, in her mind, it wasn't a lie anymore. It was a necessary step toward something real. Upstairs, Lily sat awake in her room. Listening. Not to the words, but to the silence between them. And even at her age, she understood something neither adult was willing to admit. That whatever was happening downstairs wasn't just distance anymore. It was the beginning of an ending. Rebecca chose a Monday. Not because it meant anything, but because it didn't. No birthdays, no anniversaries, no milestones that would stain the memory. Just an ordinary day, quiet enough to disappear into. She woke up before sunrise. For a moment, she stayed still, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent. No footsteps, no voices. Just the low hum of the heater and the faint rhythm of Daniel breathing beside her. She turned her head slightly. He was asleep on his side, one arm tucked under the pillow, the other resting loosely across the space between them. There had been a time when that space didn't exist. Now it felt like a border. Rebecca studied his face, familiar in every detail. The faint line between his brows, the soft shadow of stubble along his jaw. This was a man she had known intimately for years. And yet, she felt nothing. No pull, no hesitation. Just clarity. She slipped out of bed without waking him. Downstairs, the kitchen looked exactly as it always did. Orderly. Clean. Predictable. Rebecca stood at the counter, staring at the coffee machine. For a second, she almost started. It almost followed the routine. Her body knew without thinking. Instead, she reached for her phone. Ethan, today. She exhaled slowly. Rebecca. Yes. The reply came instantly. Ethan. I'll be ready. Ready. The word sent something sharp and electric through her chest, not fear, anticipation. The kids came down one by one. The youngest, first sleepy, dragging a blanket behind them. Then the middle child, already glued to a screen. And finally Lily. Always Lily last. She paused halfway down the stairs when she saw Rebecca standing there, fully dressed. You're up early, Lily said. Rebecca smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep. Lily studied her for a second longer than necessary. You've been saying that a lot. Rebecca didn't respond. She moved instead, grabbing plates, setting the table. Small motions to fill the space. Cereal okay? She asked. The younger two nodded without looking up. Lily didn't answer. She walked into the kitchen, slowly leaning against the counter. Are you going somewhere? She asked. The question landed differently. Too direct. Rebecca kept her back turned. Just some errands. Dressed like that, Rebecca glanced down at herself. Blouse, heels, a touch more makeup than usual. She didn't think it was obvious, but Lily wasn't asking. She was noticing. It's nothing important, Rebecca said. Another lie. This one felt heavier. Daniel came down last. Tie, half-knotted sleeves rolled. He moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, pouring coffee, checking his watch. Then he stopped. Not abruptly. Just enough. You're leaving, he asked. Rebecca nodded. Yeah, I have things to take care of. Daniel held her gaze for a moment, not searching, not questioning, just registering. Okay, he said finally. That was all, no argument, no confusion, just acceptance, and somehow that made it harder. The moment didn't come with a dramatic goodbye. No one stopped her. No one asked her to stay. Rebecca grabbed her bag keys in hand and paused at the door. For a second, just one, she hesitated. Not because she was unsure, but because she expected something. A voice, a reason, a resistance, something to make this feel like a decision she had to fight for. But the house remained still. Behind her, the faint sound of spoons against bowls, a chair scraping lightly against the floor, life continuing, without interruption. Rebecca opened the door and stepped out. The air outside was cold, sharp enough to make her inhale deeply. She walked to her car, each step steady, deliberate. This wasn't running away. She told herself that again. This was movement forward towards something real. Ethan's apartment didn't look like a mistake. That mattered more than she expected. Clean lines, open space, light pouring through wide windows. It felt intentional, designed, different from the life she had left behind. He opened the door before she knocked, like he had been waiting. Hey, he said, voice low, calm. Rebecca stepped inside, and just like that, there was no turning back. The first few hours felt surreal. Not chaotic, not rushed, just new. Ethan didn't overwhelm her with questions. He didn't ask about Daniel, about the kids. He let her settle. You okay? He asked at one point. Rebecca nodded. I thought I'd feel worse. Ethan watched her carefully. About what? She hesitated, then said it plainly. Leaving. The word hung there, unsoftened, unapologetic. Ethan stepped closer, his voice quieter now. Maybe that means it was the right choice. Rebecca let that sink in. Right choice. It fit, clean, simple, necessary. By the afternoon, her phone started buzzing. Missed calls, messages. Daniel, Lily. She stared at the screen, didn't answer, didn't open them. Instead, she turned the phone over, placing it face down on the table. Ethan noticed. "You don't have to ignore them," he said. Rebecca shook her head. "If I start explaining, I'll start doubting. And you don't want that." "No." The certainty in her voice surprised even her. That night, they sat on the balcony, city lights stretching endlessly below. Rebecca leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I spent years thinking I was trapped," she said. Ethan didn't interrupt. "I told myself it was responsibility, that I had to stay, that leaving would make me selfish." She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes, but maybe staying was the lie. Ethan held her gaze. Or maybe he said softly, "You just weren't ready to choose yourself yet." The words settled deep, because they didn't feel like justification anymore. They felt like truth. Rebecca smiled, small but real. "I think I am now." Across the city, in a house that still smelled faintly of her perfume, Daniel sat at the kitchen table. Rebecca's phone charger remained plugged into the wall, her coffee cup still in the sink. Nothing had moved, except everything. Lily stood across from him, arms crossed tightly. "Where is she?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his phone. At the message he had already read, "I need time. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." No explanation, no apology. Just distance packaged as necessity. Daniel placed the phone down carefully. "She's not coming back tonight," he said. Lily's expression didn't change, but her voice did. "She's not coming back at all, is she?" The question cut through the room, clean, precise. Daniel met his daughter's eyes, and for the first time he didn't soften the truth. "No," he said quietly. Upstairs, the younger two slept, unaware. For now. Downstairs, Lily turned away, walking toward the stairs. Halfway up, she stopped. "Did you know?" she asked without turning back. Daniel didn't respond right away, because the answer was complicated. "Yes," he said finally. "Not everything, not the details, but enough. Enough to see the distance, enough to recognize the shift, enough to understand that something had already been lost long before today." Lily nodded slowly. Then she said something that would stay with him long after the silence returned. "You should have stopped her." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, but when he opened them, his voice was steady. "No," he said, "I shouldn't have had to." Back on the balcony, Rebecca laughed softly at something Ethan said. Her posture relaxed, her eyes brighter, alive, in a way she hadn't felt in years, and in that moment she believed it completely. That she hadn't abandoned anything, that she had escaped, that what she left behind was obligation and what she stepped into was truth. She didn't realize yet that the most dangerous illusions don't feel like lies. They feel like freedom. The first crack didn't sound like something breaking. It sounded like silence. It happened 3 months in, quietly, almost politely. Rebecca woke up alone. At first she didn't think much of it. Ethan had early meetings sometimes, or so he said. His side of the bed was cold, the sheets smooth, untouched, since the night before. She reached for her phone. No message, no note, just an empty space where expectation used to be. Rebecca sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her. The apartment felt larger in the morning, colder, the kind of quiet that didn't comfort it exposed. She told herself it didn't matter, that this was normal. Adults had lives, responsibilities, independence. She repeated that thought while making coffee, while checking her phone again, while noticing that the conversation thread between them, once constant alive, had grown shorter, more spaced out, more optional. When Ethan finally texted, it was past noon. Ethan got caught up. "Didn't want to wake you." Rebecca stared at the message. Something about it felt distant, not wrong, just incomplete. "Rebecca, you could have left a note," a pause. Then Ethan. "Didn't think it was a big deal. That should have been enough." It wasn't. By the time he got home that night, Rebecca had already replayed the message in her head too many times. "You're overthinking it," Ethan said, loosening his tie, not quite meeting her eyes. "I'm not overthinking," she replied. "I just expected..." What he interrupted gently. "Constant updates." Rebecca crossed her arms. "I expected..." something. Ethan exhaled, moving past her into the kitchen. "We're not in high school, Rebecca." The words weren't harsh, but they landed that way. "I'm not asking for attention," she said, quieter now. "Then what are you asking for?" Rebecca hesitated, because she didn't have a clear answer, and that was new. The days that followed didn't collapse all at once. They shifted, subtly, Ethan became harder to read. He still smiled, still touched her, still spoke in that calm, steady voice that had once felt grounding. But something underneath had changed. He cancelled plans more often, took calls in other rooms, answered questions with half answers, and every time Rebecca noticed, she explained it away. He's busy, he's stressed, you're being insecure. The same way she used to explain her marriage. The parallel didn't occur to her, not yet. One evening, Rebecca found herself alone again. The city outside buzzed with movement, cars, voices, life continuing without pause. Inside, the apartment was still, too still. She wandered into the spare room Ethan had offered her for painting. The canvases lined the wall, some finished, some abandoned halfway through. Rebecca stood in front of one she had started weeks ago. Bright colors, bold strokes, energy. She tilted her head slightly. It looked different now, not wrong, but forced, like something trying too hard to be alive. She reached for a brush, paused, then set it back down. The urge wasn't there anymore, not the way it had been. Her phone buzzed. Lily. Rebecca froze. It had been weeks since her daughter last called, longer since Rebecca had answered. The screen lit up again, persistent, demanding, real. Rebecca let it ring, watched it fade, then sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Her chest tightened, but not with guilt, with something more uncomfortable, disconnection. Like the life she had left behind was no longer reachable, but not fully gone either, just suspended. "You've been quiet," Ethan said later that night. Rebecca looked up from the couch. "Have I?" He nodded, pouring himself a drink. "Yeah?" More than usual. She studied him for a moment. "You've been distant." Ethan didn't react immediately. He took a sip, then set the glass down carefully. "I've just had a lot going on." Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "You said that last week, and it's still true." The answer was simple. Too simple. Rebecca felt something shift inside her, not sharp, not sudden, just clarity, the kind that doesn't arrive with noise, only with absence. "Do you still want this?" she asked. The question hung in the air longer than expected. Ethan looked at her, then really looked, and for a moment she saw it. Not hesitation, not confusion, something else. Calculation. "I'm here, aren't I?" he said. Rebecca held his gaze. "That's not what I asked." Silence stretched. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what? Turning everything into a test?" Rebecca shook her head slowly. "I'm not testing you. I'm trying to understand where we are." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "We're together," he said. "Isn't that enough?" The question echoed, because once it would have been, now it wasn't. Later that night, Rebecca lay awake while Ethan slept beside her. His breathing was steady, unbothered, unaware. She stared at the ceiling the same way she had months ago, but this time the feeling was different. Back then, she had felt trapped. Now she felt something worse, unanchored. She turned her head slightly, looking at him, at the man she had believed was her escape, her truth, her answer. And, for the first time, she didn't recognize what she saw, not fully, not clearly, just fragments, pieces that didn't quite fit together anymore. The realization didn't come as a shock. It came as a quiet question, one she couldn't ignore. What if this isn't it? The thought stayed with her the next morning, and the next, growing louder with each small inconsistency, each unanswered message, each moment that felt less. Rebecca began noticing things she hadn't before, the way Ethan avoided certain conversations, the way his attention drifted when she spoke too long, the way his affection felt timed, measured, not instinctive, and underneath it all, a growing emptiness. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just persistent. One afternoon, as she sat alone in the cafe where they first met, Rebecca realized something she hadn't allowed herself to consider. She had traded one life for another, one version of herself for another, but the feeling she had been chasing, the clarity, the certainty, the truth, was still just out of reach, always just enough to keep her moving, never enough to let her stop. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan, short, casual, detached. Rebecca stared at it, then looked around the cafe, at the strangers, the movement, the noise, at a world that didn't know her and didn't care to. She exhaled slowly. And for the first time since she left, she didn't feel like she was moving forward. She felt like she was circling something, something she hadn't fully understood yet, because the illusion hadn't shattered. Not yet, but it was no longer whole, and the most dangerous part wasn't that it was breaking, it was that she could feel it, and still wasn't ready to let it go. The truth didn't arrive as a revelation. It revealed itself in patterns. Rebecca stopped asking where Ethan was. Not because she trusted him, but because the answers had started to sound the same. Work ran late. Last-minute meeting, client dinner. Different words, same distance. At first, she had tried to keep track dates, times, inconsistencies that didn't quite align, but somewhere along the way, she realized something unsettling. It didn't matter if he was lying, because even when he was telling the truth, it still felt like absence. "You're doing it again," Ethan said one night, tossing his keys onto the counter. "Doing what? That thing, where you look at me like I've already disappointed you." Rebecca didn't respond immediately. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, watching the city below. "I'm just trying to understand you," she said finally. Ethan let out a quiet laugh. "No, you're trying to fix me. That's not true." "Then what is it?" Rebecca turned, meeting his eyes. For a moment she considered lying, choosing the easier version. But something in her had shifted. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything she had said to him before. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't defend himself. He just shrugged slightly, like the statement didn't require correction. "Maybe you never did." That should have shaken her. Instead, it clarified something. The unraveling wasn't dramatic. It was cumulative. Small moments stacking on top of each other until they became impossible to ignore. Like the night Rebecca waited 2 hours at a restaurant while Ethan's phone went straight to voicemail. Or the weekend he disappeared entirely, returning with a vague explanation and no interest in discussing it further. Or the way he stopped asking about her painting. Stopped noticing when she didn't paint at all. "You've changed," Rebecca said one afternoon. Ethan glanced up from his laptop, barely pausing. "People do." "That's not what I mean." "Then say what you mean." Rebecca hesitated, because this time she couldn't soften it. "You're not here anymore." Ethan closed his laptop, slowly leaning back in his chair. "I'm sitting right in front of you. That's not the same thing." A pause. Then, "You're asking for something I never promised," he said. The sentence landed with quiet precision. Rebecca felt it immediately. Not as a shock, but as confirmation. "You promised me everything," she said, her voice tighter now. Ethan shook his head. "No, you heard everything." "That's different." The room fell silent, because deep down she knew. That night, Rebecca sat alone on the balcony, the same place where everything had once felt certain. Now it felt exposed. She replayed the beginning in her mind, the conversations, the intensity, the way he had seen her, really seen her, or at least that's what she had believed. But now, looking back, she noticed the gaps, the way he had reflected her words back to her, the way he had never fully revealed himself, the way everything had always been about how she felt, not who he actually was. It hadn't been connection, it had been projection. Inside, Ethan moved around casually, as if nothing had shifted, as if everything was exactly as it had always been. And maybe for him it was. "Do you love me?" Rebecca asked later, standing in the doorway. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. "I care about you." "That's not what I asked." He sighed, finally, meeting her eyes. "Why does it have to be a label?" Rebecca stepped closer. "Because I left everything for you." The words echoed harder than she expected. Ethan's expression didn't change. "I didn't ask you to do that." There it was. Not cruelty, not anger, just detachment, clean, unapologetic, final. Rebecca felt something inside her shift, not breaking, settling, like a truth she had been avoiding had finally found its place. "You knew," she said quietly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Knew what that I would." He didn't answer, because he didn't have to. Across the city, in a house that no longer felt incomplete, Daniel stood in the kitchen watching Lily rinse dishes at the sink. "You don't have to do that," he said. Lily shrugged. "I know." But she didn't stop. The younger two sat at the table, arguing softly over homework, their voices light, normal in a way that had taken time to rebuild. Daniel leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Your recital is next week," he said. Lily nodded. "You're coming right, wouldn't miss it." She hesitated for a second, then asked, "You think she knows?" Daniel didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I think," he said carefully, "she's starting to." Lily turned off the water, drying her hands slowly. "Good." The word wasn't angry, it wasn't even bitter. It was resolved. Life had reshaped itself around the absence. Not perfectly, not easily, but steadily. Daniel had learned the rhythm of mornings alone, the chaos of managing 3 schedules, the quiet weight of unanswered questions, and somewhere along the way, he had stopped waiting. Back in Ethan's apartment, Rebecca stood in the center of the room. Everything looked the same. The furniture, the light, the space she had once believed was her escape. But now it felt hollow. Not empty, just lacking substance, like a set designed to look real from a distance. "I think I made a mistake," she said finally. Ethan didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was calm. "Then, fix it." Rebecca let out a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. "Fix it? Yeah. You're the one who believes in choices. Remember, the words echoed something she had once said, something she had believed." Rebecca nodded slowly, but this time the clarity felt different. Not empowering, not freeing, just inevitable. Because for the first time since she left, she wasn't questioning her marriage, or her past, or even Ethan. She was questioning herself. And the answer was no longer comforting. As the night settled in, Rebecca stood by the window one last time, looking out at the city she had once believed held her future. Now it just reflected her back at herself, distorted, fragmented, unfamiliar. The illusion hadn't just cracked, it had revealed what had always been underneath. And the hardest truth wasn't that Ethan wasn't who she thought he was, it was that she had never really known him at all. 5 years later, Rebecca didn't knock right away. She stood on the sidewalk across from the house, her house once hands buried deep in the pockets of a coat that no longer held warmth the way it used to. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same trimmed hedges, same quiet streets, same illusion of stability. Only now she was on the outside of it, looking in. Ethan had left 2 years ago. Not with a fight, not with closure, just a conversation that felt more like a business decision than an ending. "I think we've run our course." That was all he said. No apology, no regret, just distance, final and absolute. Rebecca had nodded at the time, as if she understood, as if she had expected it. Maybe she had. The years after that blurred together. Jobs that didn't last, apartments that never felt like home, conversations that never went deeper than surface. People came and went. Nothing stayed, not even the version of herself she had once been so certain about, especially not that. Now, she was back, not because she had a plan, but because she had nowhere else to go. The house looked smaller than she remembered, or maybe she just saw it more clearly now. Rebecca stepped closer, her chest tightening with every step up the walkway. She noticed things she hadn't before, a new mailbox, different curtains, a bike leaning against the porch, signs of a life that had continued. Without her, she raised her hand, paused, lowered it again. Her breath came uneven, catching somewhere between her chest and her throat. This wasn't fear, it was something heavier, recognition. Then the door opened. Daniel stood there, older, quieter, but not broken. That surprised her the most. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rebecca's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Daniel didn't ask why she was there, didn't ask how she had been. He just looked at her, not with anger, not with longing, just clarity. "I didn't know where else to go," she said finally. Her voice was thinner than she remembered. Daniel nodded once, as if that made sense, because it did. From upstairs, a voice Dad Rebecca froze. Footsteps followed, slower than she expected, heavier. And then Lily appeared. She had changed the most, not just older, different. The softness in her face had sharpened into something more defined, controlled. She stopped halfway down the stairs when she saw Rebecca. The silence that followed wasn't uncertain. It was deliberate. "Hi, Rebecca," said her voice trembling now. Lily didn't respond. She just looked at her, and in that look there was no confusion, no hesitation, just distance. "You're back," Lily said. "Not a question, a statement." Rebecca nodded, swallowing hard. I wanted to see you. All of you." Lily stepped down the remaining stairs slowly, each step measured. "You already did that," she said. Rebecca flinched. I know, Lily cut, in her voice calm, but precise. "You saw us. You just didn't stay." The words landed harder than anything else could have, because they weren't emotional. They were factual. "I made a mistake," Rebecca said quickly, the words spilling now. I thought I was doing the right thing. You thought about yourself," Lily said. Rebecca stopped, because there was no space left to reframe it. "I'm your mother," she said softer now. "That doesn't just disappear. Lily tilted her head slightly. No, she agreed. It doesn't. A pause. Then it changes. Rebecca felt it then, fully. Not guilt, not regret, something deeper, irreversible. I want to come back, she said, her voice breaking. I can fix this. I can. No, Lily said. Not loudly, not harshly, just final. The word echoed in the room. Rebecca looked at Daniel as if he might intervene. Say something. Correct it. But he didn't move. Didn't speak because he wasn't the one who needed to. You don't get to come back, Lily continued, her voice steady now. You don't get to leave and then decide we're still here waiting for you. I wasn't. You were, Lily said. You just didn't think it mattered. Upstairs, a door opened. The younger two stood there now, watching, not running down, not calling out, just observing, like they were looking at someone they used to know. Rebecca's chest tightened painfully. I missed you, she said, her voice cracking. Every day I thought about you. Did you call? Lily asked. Rebecca hesitated, because the answer wasn't enough. Did you show up? Lily pressed. Silence. That's what I thought. The distance between them wasn't physical. It was built, layer by layer. Missed calls, unanswered messages, empty birthdays, silent milestones, 5 years of absence condensed into a single moment. I didn't know how, Rebecca whispered. Lily nodded slowly. That doesn't make it better. Rebecca took a step forward. Lily didn't move, didn't step back, but she didn't meet her halfway either. I don't have anything left, Rebecca said, the truth finally breaking through. I lost everything. Lily's expression didn't change. That wasn't an accident. The words hit their mark, clean, precise, unavoidable. For the first time, Rebecca didn't try to argue, didn't try to explain, because there was nothing left to defend. Daniel finally stepped forward, not to protect Rebecca, but to close the space, gently, decisively. You should go, he said. His voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was something else, resolved. Rebecca looked at him, really looked. At the man she had once believed she outgrew, at the life she had walked away from, at the version of herself she could never return to. I don't belong anywhere, she said softly. Daniel held her gaze, then answered, You made sure of that. The door didn't slam, it closed quietly. Outside, the air felt colder than before. Rebecca stood there for a long moment, not moving, not thinking, just existing in the aftermath. Inside, Lily turned away first. Walking back upstairs without another word, the younger two followed, not looking back. And Daniel stood alone in the hallway, listening to the silence she left behind. 5 years ago, Rebecca had believed she was choosing herself. Now she understood the truth. She hadn't chosen herself. She had abandoned the only place that had ever made her real. And there was no way back. Rebecca didn't leave the neighborhood right away. She walked, not toward anything, just away from the door that had closed on her. The sky had darkened into that quiet blue just before night fully takes over. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across sidewalks she used to know by heart. 5 years ago she had walked these same streets with purpose. Now, every step felt borrowed. She didn't remember deciding to sit down, only that at some point she was on a bench across from a small park where her children used to play, where Lily had once fallen off a swing and run straight into her arms crying. Where she had promised, I'm here. Rebecca let out a soft, broken laugh. The sound didn't echo. Nothing did anymore. Rebecca. The voice came from behind her. She didn't turn immediately, because she knew, not hoped, not guessed, knew. Daniel sat down beside her, leaving a small space between them, the same kind of space that had once existed in their bed before it became a distance she couldn't cross. You didn't have to follow me, she said quietly. I didn't, he replied. I chose to. The words landed differently now. Choice. They had both used that word once, like it meant freedom. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The park was empty. The faint sound of traffic in the distance, a dog barking somewhere too far away to matter. Rebecca stared ahead. I meant what I said, she murmured. I don't belong anywhere. Daniel nodded once. I know. No comfort, no contradiction, just acknowledgement. She swallowed hard. I thought if I came back, maybe, that it would still be here, he finished. Rebecca nodded. Daniel exhaled slowly, resting his elbows on his knees. It is, he said, just not for you. The words didn't hurt the way she expected, because they weren't cruel, they were accurate. I didn't understand what I was doing, she said, her voice unsteady now. I thought I was choosing something real, something honest. Daniel turned his head slightly, studying her profile. "You were," he said. Rebecca frowned faintly. "Then why does it feel like I lost everything?" "Because what you chose," Daniel replied calmly, "wasn't real." The statement settled into her like weight. Not sudden, not sharp, just undeniable. "I loved him," she whispered. Daniel didn't react, didn't argue. He just asked, "Or did you love who you were when you were with him?" Rebecca's breath caught, because that question felt too close. "You think I imagined it?" she asked. "I think," Daniel said carefully, "you needed it to be true." Silence stretched between them, long enough for the truth to settle. Rebecca looked down at her hands. They felt unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone who had made choices she couldn't undo. "He said he never promised me anything," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "That sounds like him." Rebecca turned to him sharply. "You knew—" There it was, the question that had been waiting. Daniel didn't look away. "Yes," he said. Rebecca stared at him, something fragile cracking again inside her. "You knew, and you let me leave." Daniel took a slow breath, then answered with the same calm he had carried through everything. "I didn't let you leave," he said. "I didn't stop you." "That's the same thing," she whispered. "No," Daniel replied. "It's not." He leaned back, slightly, his voice steady, grounded in something she hadn't understood before. "Stopping you would have meant convincing you that what you believed wasn't real." Rebecca shook her head, her eyes beginning to burn. "You should have tried." "I did," he said quietly. That stopped her. "In the ways that mattered," Daniel continued. "I asked questions, I paid attention, I gave you space to come back on your own." A pause. "You didn't." Rebecca felt it then, fully. Not just what she had done, but what she had chosen not to see. "You were already gone," Daniel said, "long before you walked out that door." The memory hit her all at once. The distance, the silence, the way she had stood in that kitchen and said she felt nothing. "I thought I was brave," she said, her voice breaking now. "I thought I was choosing myself." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time there was something close to sadness in his expression. "You weren't choosing yourself," he said. "You were choosing a version of yourself that didn't exist." The truth didn't explode. It settled, heavy, permanent. Rebecca let out a shaky breath. "I kept telling myself it was worth it," she admitted, "that losing everything meant I was finally being honest." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's how illusions work." She closed her eyes. Tears slipped through, quiet and unresisted. "I destroyed my family for something that wasn't even real." Daniel didn't interrupt, because there was nothing to soften. When she opened her eyes again, her voice was smaller. "Why didn't you hate me?" Daniel considered the question, then answered simply, "Because I understood you." That hurt more than anger ever could have. "I don't understand myself," Rebecca whispered. Daniel stood up slowly, brushing his hands together. "You do now," he said. She looked up at him, panic flickering briefly beneath the exhaustion. "What am I supposed to do?" Daniel met her gaze one last time, and his answer was the only one he had left to give. "Live with it." No solution, no redemption, no way back, just truth. Rebecca nodded slowly, not because she accepted it, but because she finally understood there was nothing else. Daniel turned and walked away, not looking back, not hesitating. This time he didn't wait. Rebecca stayed on the bench long after he was gone. The night fully settled around her, wrapping the world in quiet darkness. Cars passed, lights flickered, life continued. But she remained exactly where she was. Not moving forward, not going back, because for the first time she saw it clearly. The life she had left wasn't a cage. It had been an anchor. The man she thought she outgrew had been her reality, and the love she chased had only existed in the reflection of what she needed to believe. She hadn't escaped. She had replaced something real with something that only felt real long enough to destroy it. And now there was nothing left to return to. Only the echo of a choice she could never undo.